in the wrong room. But anyway, welcome to Web3, the great debate. Thank you for coming out to have a listen. The panel makeup has changed a few times over the past few days since some people couldn't make it. So thank you for being patient, and I had to redo my questions because we all have a security focus, so it required a different set of questions than the one that I prepared. So I want to get you in the habit of asking questions and raising your hand. So how many people in here think blockchain is a scam? All right, this is a safe space, okay. I probably should have said that before you raised your hand. Sorry about the warning. Well, maybe. That's a legal definition. Do any of you have any blockchain projects in your work? So does your organization have blockchain projects? Okay, good. All right, very good. So one of the things that I've noticed in this space is that security people seem to be very opinionated on this topic, to say the least. And I'm starting to notice a trend because in the past, we've been the same with other technologies. So when the cloud first came out, I saw a lot of security people wearing shirts that said there is no cloud, just someone else's computer. And, years later, now we have cloud security people. So I think it's good to kind of take a step back when it comes to any new and emerging technology and say, what is the security professional's role in this? Because if we sit on the sidelines, things rarely get better. So to kick it off, my name is Nathan Hamill. I am Senior Director of Research at Kudelski Security. My team handles emerging technologies, mostly in the space of advanced cryptography, blockchains, AI, quantum security, and many other things. So a lot of these technologies have been coming across my desk for the past few years. How I got started in this space was I didn't have a choice. Like maybe some people, our team was working on it when I joined the team 4 years ago, so I had to rapidly ramp up and care for the most part. And I think you'll find if you start digging into it, you will like the technology as well, at least from a technological perspective. So I'd like to let the panelists introduce themselves, and along with your introduction, if you could kind of just say how you got introduced to blockchain and or Web3 in general.
Cool. Hey everybody, I'm Guido, the CEO and co-founder of Trail of Bits. Some of you might remember me from the keynote yesterday morning. So Trail of Bits is a software security consulting firm that works on high assurance software. We do work in low-level application security, modern cryptography like multi-party computation, zero-knowledge proofs, as well as blockchain security, smart contracts, layer 1 blockchains, asset custody for financial institutions, and the like. I got into blockchain because back in 2016, I thought it was really dumb, but one of my really good friends was Amber Balday, the head of blockchain at JP Morgan, and she managed to convince me and a couple friends to buy stakes in something called the DAO. And all of a sudden, me and 3 friends lost a little tiny bit of money that we put into it, and it hit us smack in the face that, shit, there's actual real money getting lost because of stupid hackers, and there's like an immediate effect from this stuff that we can influence. So the very first steps that Trail of Bits took into this space was we actually built a symbolic Ethereum virtual machine. We built an emulated environment that allowed us to analyze the security properties of smart contracts inside a tool we have called Manticore. And that extraordinarily comprehensive analysis allowed us to start performing consulting in that space. And now I have a team of 20 engineers that work on nothing but blockchain security. It's been a fun ride, and I'm sure we'll talk more about it. So,
Hi, my name is Jan. I run security at Brave Browser. So when I joined Brave in 2015, I thought it was we were making a browser, and then we ended up slowly becoming more and more of a cryptocurrency project. So I feel like I was actually tricked into knowing about Ethereum. But it's I think I've learned a lot about it. I think I would still call myself like a cryptocurrency skeptic in a lot of ways.
Hi, so I'm Jean-Baptiste Bédrune. So I work at Ledger. I'm the VP of Product Security there. I'm leading this security team, which is named the Donjon, which is responsible for the security of the hardware wallets developed at Ledger. And actually, I'm mainly a reverse engineer. I'm doing reverse engineering for more than 20 years. And I was not convinced by cryptocurrencies and so on in the past. Actually, I was introduced to cryptocurrencies 14 years ago because I subscribed to the mailing list where Satoshi Nakamoto sent the Bitcoin paper, the famous Bitcoin paper. And at that time, I read it and I didn't find it really interesting. I didn't understand the problems he wanted to solve. So I let it alone, and 10 years after, I worked on cool cryptocurrency project on Monero, which was involving really nice and state-of-the-art cryptography. Then I was more convinced, at least by the technology, and moved to Ledger at the time.
Great. So I'd like to kind of start off. You might want to keep the microphone for a second, because first question might be for you. So I'd like to start off on the user side. So away from the developers, like user security in the blockchain Web3 space largely relies on people keeping a secret and not clicking on things. Now, these are two things we know users are not good at doing. I mean, we still have problems with this in the traditional space. The other thing is that with the permanence of the blockchain, it can mean that these transactions are irreversible. You may have seen people on Twitter complaining that their NFTs got stolen and there's nothing that can be done about it. Welcome to decentralization. So these are certain problems, right, that would have to be solved in order for wider adoption. The other thing that's happening is that we have hardened our users not to failure, but so that they can fail and they have a recourse. Somebody forgets their password, they have password resets. So my question is, what kind of enhancements from a usability perspective and a user security perspective would it take for larger adoption on the client side?
Yes, that's a difficult question. I think my first response is user education, but that clearly doesn't work. Because as you said, people are not good to not click on stuff. So actually we do a lot of effort at Ledger on this, with hardware wallets. And, but it's really difficult. We have to work a lot on UX and so on to really tell people what they can do, what they shouldn't do. But actually we have a very small screen and this is difficult to give you the correct information. Actually, what I would say is that you have to always understand what you are doing before clicking on something. But yeah, this is difficult. And actually, the first response is probably usual security questions, usual security concerns that you have. Like if you have malware on your computer, you can lose all your money if you use a software wallet, for example, because it will steal your private keys. So it's all about private key protection, which hardware wallets are good at, actually. And also, that's already a thing.
I can give some examples here. So one of the funniest examples that I like to give about this kind of user experience security issue was a recent one with OpenSea, where this massive hysteria came out on Twitter that OpenSea was hacked. Everybody's losing all their NFTs. Quick, remove all your approvals. And when we looked into it, it ended up being actually a very targeted phishing attack towards people that had some of the most valuable NFTs on that marketplace. The key security issue here was not that people clicked on the wrong link, was not that they were misinterpreting information given to them, but that the transaction that was being asked to be approved in MetaMask was untyped. So if you take a look at the request for approval and you looked at the version that was phishing and the version that was not, they were identical. You just got this big blob of hex bytes. And there was no way for a person, even if they were educated, to understand what they were actually approving. So one of the reactions to that from the OpenSea team was to add type information to the smart contract that powered their marketplace. And with that type information, now MetaMask or your wallet could populate what was being asked of you, where that information was going, what it was going to cost, what NFTs were being accessed. And with that, a user could then actually make an educated decision. So a lot of this is not actually on the user side. A lot of this is a product management issue. And I think one topic that a lot of people in the blockchain space do not yet understand is how to perform negative testing from a product management standpoint. There's a wide field of something called abusability testing that is a systematic process to find where users will go off the beaten path and find themselves stuck in a corner and achieve some kind of bad outcome. And this sort of abusability testing is not a widespread practice despite the high value of this field. So I've been advocating for that. I don't think it's really a user issue, but there are a lot of kind of central points in the field that are holding the rest of it back. And one of them is one that I've already mentioned, which is MetaMask. They make hundreds of millions of dollars per year. They have a built-in function that lets you swap cryptocurrency. And as a result of this teeny little tiny function, they make about $200 million a year. And I do not know what they spend it on for the life of me. So that is really, I think, a failure of imagination. There aren't really good competitors to MetaMask. And if there were, and if somebody had built in some of these more robust user experience practices, the whole field would be better off. Now, the last issue that I wanted to bring up was this people have to store their own private keys. I violently advocate for people to use centralized exchanges. When you are storing your own private keys, it is like storing cash under your mattress. You have to figure out how to build a bank vault around it, how to provide 24/7 security, how to do monitoring, how to do detection for when there's loss, how to stay up to date on the latest threats, and it just does not work except for the largest, most well-resourced firms. A lot of what we do in consulting for asset custody projects, where we work with, like, let's say, a venture capital firm or a hedge fund that all of a sudden has like 3 people in it that have to manage $200 million, is we help them build something called a secure access workstation, which is a non-internet connected or limited internet connected machine through which they can process their financial transactions. The browser wallet sort of thing simply exposes people to too much risk. And if people adopt these more robust methods to keep things off the internet or through limited connections, they generally can remain safe. But the effort to stay consistent with that practice is huge. It requires you to be a bank. It requires you to have tens of millions of dollars. So for most normal people, they should just put it in Coinbase or Gemini or another reputable centralized exchange.
So on that front, I think the community would push back and say that that's the whole point. And I think the first part of your answer is very limited, right? So the OpenSea issue is a very specific issue. You brought up MetaMask. A lot of people get conned by MetaMask support, right? Yeah. So, and if you've never participated in this space, if you go join one of the Discords for one of the projects, what you'll find is you're automatically added to some fake channels, and you'll get offered airdrops and a bunch of other things. So there's also traditional risks like phishing, right, which become much more effective. We had a hack of MailChimp in order to target specific customers. So I think in this space, like the user security is so vast because you have to encompass the entire traditional space along with all of the new things that the chain brings.
So I'll respond to that since, what was I saying? So here's the key thing. And this is a rule, it's a simple one that I advocate to people who have cryptocurrency. You should not manage cryptocurrency on the same machine or the same identity that has exposure to any sort of social media. If you can do that, if you can disconnect, there are 2 humans that are managing these things. There is the person that goes on the internet and tweets, the person that goes on Discord, and there is the person that has a cryptocurrency wallet. If you are successful at keeping those 2 things separated, you will not fall victim to phishing attacks. Plain as day. That is the one step to solve the problem. The problem with that is that there are ways that people want to more interactively kind of work with applications on the blockchain. Those sorts of applications fall apart in that model. But for the most part, I don't think people are doing that sort of thing. A lot of people are buying and holding, right? So in that mode, it is the safest to simply split yourself into two people and manage those identities separately, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, from the security perspective, that makes sense, but it almost leads to like a self-defeating future of cryptocurrency where people just hodl, and the original vision of this being a beautiful, decentralized utility currency that you use to circumvent censorships and direct micropayments to your friends on Twitter and so forth just breaks down. So it does seem like a really I don't know. So in Brave, we do have a cryptocurrency wallet built in. And originally it was supposed to be a very small amount of currency because you were just using it at the level of, let's say, like $5 to $10 a month to pay websites that you like visiting. But nowadays, partly due to pressure from competitors like MetaMask and Opera adding cryptocurrency wallets, we're also working on a cryptocurrency wallet. And by far the most successful attacks I've seen are not cryptography attacks, which is what the cypherpunks might have thought. It is people downloading the wrong version of MetaMask. There's many spoofed MetaMask extensions, and often we see reports where they say like, oh no, there's actually a really interesting one where there was an interesting one where it was the real MetaMask extension, but it was a fake support page that told you to set up your MetaMask wallet using a private key that the attacker obviously knows. Right, and then when you put in your funds, the attacker already has that private key and can do whatever they want. So people are getting creative.
I will say what I was suggesting before also works if you just have two different Brave profiles or two different Chrome profiles, right? You could have them on the same computer, but you need to be able to opt in. You need to be able to mentally separate what happens on Discord from what happens on your crypto and be able to opt into like, this is a site that I am choosing to use my crypto at versus I'm just going to keep this turned on for every single page I visit on the internet and click links that open in the same browser profile. That's where the pain comes in. There's different degrees of segregation that you can make. Like you can have a different Chrome profile, you can have a different user account, you can have a different computer, you could have a different anonymous identity, right? Like I could be Bob or whatever on the internet. And any of those levels of separation will aid you. And the closer that you get, the less security guarantee, but the more usability.
Yeah, now you can see why this is such a problem. Because this is not something normal users would do, average users. So kind of like from the perspective of, usability, I think my mom, I hope she doesn't have any cryptocurrency, by the way, she would not either know how to do this or would not do it properly. So to keep things rolling here, so Dan, yesterday in your keynote, you mentioned the maturity, basically, of the projects that you see. And from us, I would say that we see the exact opposite. So just about every project we see has a very low level of maturity. For example, simple things like equality operators in the wrong direction. Or one of my favorites, by the way, if you're an audit company, there are two things that you see quite often. You audit a project, and somebody immediately 2 days later pushes vulnerable code to the project, and they're waving their audit report around. Or another one of my favorites where we actually call the vulnerability out, and the developer says, oh, that's bad, we're going to remove that piece of code, and then a month later they're like, oh yeah, we were actually using that functionality, so they push it right back in. Yep. And to me, the audit process in general to a lot of these developers seems like an act of desperation. Like they don't know what to do with security, so they try to throw money at it, which is a thing we've seen in the past in security. We've even had people who basically went to a boot camp and then got VC funding. They'd never developed anything before. So I guess, is it really true that most of your customers are that mature, or is that just the example you were using for what the blockchain got right? And secondarily, for the rest of the panelists afterwards, do you have any observations on the maturity of developers?
So the first thing to know here, which is hard if you're outside the space, is that security in blockchain is bimodally distributed. There are some people that are doing excellent, and there are many people that are doing awful, and there is no one in between. So what we do as Trail of Bits is in the qualification process, I only work with people who are doing good. I weed out the people that are not in it for the right reasons, the people that don't have a clue about where they're going. Those are not the people that I want to work with. So a lot of the teams that I do work with are on the higher end of the scale. They come in with specifications either written in English or programmatically, and we help them improve them. And a lot of what we get is actually once you start to define these properties and start to prove them as you work, is you actually get the ability to modify the code safely. You can change the features, rerun your specification testing, and show that they all the tests still pass. And because they pass, you know that you didn't introduce a new security vulnerability by making a minor change. So that kind of thing helps companies break free of their dependence on a security auditor. You do not want to always have me looking over your shoulder. You will not always have me looking over your shoulder as you write new code. I simply don't have the time in the day. So a lot of what we do from a Trail of Bits perspective is what I'd call capacity building. We are trying to help the security team, or rather the development team at our clients, do things on their own and trust their own work. And the way you do that is by adopting a lot of the techniques that I have in my keynote. So we've had great success with that. I think, as a rule, 80% of all projects that Trail of Bits works on result in the development of some sort of properties, invariants, or specifications for a client. And the vast majority of those are programmatically defined and fed back into CI. We fire clients routinely that seem to look at this as a checkbox. That's the reality that I see. It's definitely not it's not ever present across the community. There are so many people that are doing the opposite, and you get confirmation bias. Like all of you in the room have these predisposed ideas about what working in blockchain is like because you read the news, because every day you subscribe to Web3 is going great on Twitter. I'm sure you all know the Twitter account. It's Molly White. She's like some UX designer at some web startup in San Francisco, and she just loves to bash blockchain, and I love her for it. She's a wonderful character. But every single day there's something else to tweet about somebody losing tens of millions of dollars. And there is no shortage of people on that other end of the scale. But what you fail to understand is that confirmation bias is not an accurate representation of the space. There are people that are holding billions of dollars in assets with 100% coverage of formal verification techniques to ensure that they will never lose that money. And that is what gets me up in the morning. That's why I work on this in this field.
Yeah, I like to say that what you say is correct, but actually the customers you see are the ones that ask for a security audit, which is not the majority of the project, unfortunately. We work with like every blockchain and many projects on every blockchain, and we see very various levels of maturity. And if you want to have a broad expertise on that domain, for example, if you want to audit smart contracts, you have to be good at Solidity for Ethereum blockchains, at Rust for Solana blockchains, at Michelson for Tezos, at Cairo for Starknet. And actually, this is only for smart contracts. And there are no automatic tooling and so on for all these technologies, unfortunately. I was very surprised. I don't know if it's correct or not, but I was just very surprised that people looked for good gas optimizers for Ethereum. And this is mainly done manually, which is insane for me. I don't understand that. And also, for tooling, you have to model properties that are actually difficult to model. Some stuff can be modeled quite easily, actually, with things that we already know in common software security. Other stuff requires more knowledge, maybe in economy, you have to model difficult logic properties that you don't think about also. And this is how to model automatically. Like one example was also OpenSea. Another vulnerability on OpenSea where people were able to avoid revoking their seller offers, moved their NFTs to another wallet, then get it back to another wallet. So the seller order was not listed anymore on OpenSea, but it was still available. It was still enabled. So people attackers managed to use these older sell orders with much lower price to buy NFTs with a very small price. And this is super difficult to model. This is really easy to see it. You write it in a piece of paper and you see it immediately. But using tools and so on, this is just impossible. So we have to gain a lot of maturity, like in tooling and so on, but also in processes, architecture, and so on.
Yeah, just to respond to that, basically, you brought up a good point, because anytime I see something written about blockchain and blockchain security, it's always Ethereum. Like, it's almost like, oh, Ethereum's the only blockchain out there. But if you think about it, there's literally hundreds now. We can discount the meme coins and a bunch of other silliness, but there are really other chains that are doing legit things. And if you think about it, every single chain is like its own operating system, and every single smart contract language is like its own, programming framework. So I don't think it's that, customers are looking for a checkbox. I think they really don't know how to solve that problem. So when customers come to us, they want to do the right thing. They just don't know what that right thing is. Yeah.
So going back to security maturity in blockchain projects, I would say there's always a weakest link. So envision, a smart contract that has been formally verified, audited very well, creates a token, and then people put that token in MetaMask or some other wallet which has like 200,000 NPM dependencies maintained by people who are about to rage quit and just give their GitHub commit rights to some random person, which has actually happened. So there were a couple wallets that were hacked through these NPM supply chain attacks where, every NPM dependency has like thousands of sub-dependencies. And so if you get access to some obscure sub-dependency, you just have the same access as like the project in most cases, because there's no like privilege separation in many of these apps. So it just feels like everything's kind of on a house of cards in the NPM world, and unfortunately it seems that most client-side applications these days have at least some dependence on NPM. So another one is Mist, which used to be the official Ethereum wallet maintained by the Ethereum Foundation. I looked at it in 2018 or so, and it was using Electron, which is a great way to build cross-platform apps. At the time, Electron had no kind of sandboxing, and it was essentially being used as a browser in this case. So, you have your super secret private key in your Mist wallet, but then the Mist wallet has like a page where you can just click on support links, and through that you can click to Twitter. Through Twitter you could click to arbitrary websites, and then without sandboxing, any HTML exploit can just take your wallet private keys. So.
Yep, and a lot of these attacks seem to be a lack of imagination, like not thinking that something could have came about that way. So I want to open it up to questions in a minute, but I think there's one more question that I'd like, and I think everybody here would probably like to answer before we start taking questions, and that's development and development risks. So kind of what you just described is kind of one of just many risks that you have to take into account when developing Web3 applications. You not only need to get, the blockchain components right, but you have to get the traditional components right and all of the imagination components right, because a lot of these are financial applications. You might be able to game the system through something that's a legitimate function inside of the application. I've kind of mentioned that writing code in this space is like writing code laced with landmines. So, from an advice perspective, and also another thing, I honestly believe you cannot solve this problem with testing. We like to focus on that because that's the cool part, but testing alone will not solve the security problems in this space. There's too many other issues out there. So what should developers keep in mind as they're developing their applications to account for this increased level of risk?
Okay, so let me think. A couple things. That was a long question. I'm trying to remember here. Actually, let me start off by responding to one thing you said earlier, which I loved, which is that, that's what I wanted to say. Yes, we have empirical data that splits the difference between what kinds of bugs can be affected by analysis and testing and formal techniques and the bugs that cannot. So we did a study and mined all of the security reviews we did of blockchain software for 2 years and tried to split the bugs into categories of, theoretically, would it be possible to verify or automatically detect this bug, or would computers be unable to identify it, even in some future state where some magical advance had been made? And we found it was split 50-50. So empirically, for all of the audits that Trail of Bits has ever done, all of the real security vulnerabilities that we have found in blockchain software, 50% of them cannot be found by any automated testing method ever possible to be invented. So clearly, you have to think a little bit beyond that. I think that from a developer perspective, what people don't understand is that building smart contracts in particular is low-level programming. High-level programming is building a website. It's building JavaScript. And unfortunately, a lot of the people developing software in blockchain land are web developers. So they don't realize the transition that they've made. Low-level programming, the difference between these two things, high-level programming is you have been given an API and you use it to accomplish a task. Low-level programming requires you to understand deeply how every level below that API works. That's what you have to do when you're writing kernel drivers, when you're writing an operating system. These are things where you have to master the whole stack. And that's where we find most people get into trouble. And the people that really are not are people that acknowledge the problem for what it is and seek out that mastery. They, like my team at Trail of Bits, we paused all of our work for clients and we took Yale's financial markets course on Coursera because all of us needed a deeper knowledge of economics in order to perform our consulting, right? We have cryptographers on our team. We have people that are experts on compiler theory. It is not enough to use like IDA and go search for string copy. It is not enough to use Burp Suite and just keep on pounding on a parameter until JavaScript gets reflected to you. That's not the job that we're trying to solve. So if you are going to develop a smart contract, and if you are in this for real, you need to have a mastery of the field that you work, and you need to know what field you're working in. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, so one thing I've seen some projects like MetaMask start doing, which is really great and kind of cutting edge for JavaScript NPM security, is using systems called Lava Moat or Secure ECMAScript, where instead of just doing an NPM require where you load some dependency into like the main scope of main environment your JavaScript runs in, you load it into kind of this artificial realm with only limited privileges. So it only has access to certain window APIs and so forth. And so therefore, if it gets compromised, that dependency doesn't directly have access to people's private keys. So things like that. I guess another big one is just UX testing, because I think a lot of wallet security phishing attacks are preventable. For instance, if someone were able to see in a wallet interface that if they sign this data, it's going to drain their wallet of all their apes, they might not sign it. But the problem is, this is not something that UX designers seem to have thought about, and so wallets don't generally just like simulate that transaction and show you like what the final state of your wallet would be. Yeah, and actually, I don't think I can talk about some of the like security findings that have been reported to us, but a lot of them are just really dumb UX bugs where, you know, there's some security critical text, and because the CSS is set in a certain way that it doesn't like wrap it, you know, the security critical part gets cut off. All the apes are gone.
I totally agree with what Dan said. Actually, I think smart contract development should be considered as like secure program development with the same processes as a secure software. So unfortunately, it's quite easy to develop working stuff on Solidity. So developers are able to do stuff, but not securely. So you have to adapt things such as defensive programming and so on. And there are currently not many safeguards when you fail currently on the EVM. Like it took ages in software security to put countermeasures, software countermeasures, hardware countermeasures, and so on, which are still not present in Solidity. And it will take time. So unfortunately, we have to think about that development is that you develop secure software. So you have to follow the same principle, code assessment, external reviews, and so on, which is actually not made for many projects, as the main goal is to be the first to go into market, to take the market share. And this usually can work, but not every time, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I really do think we need to think a bit broader about this, because even though, you know, we kind of approach this, it still kind of comes back to a conversation about bugs and finding bugs. But maturity is more than just about finding bugs or about testing in general. I mean, if you find all the bugs and then, you know, yay, you thumbs up and then you push vulnerable code later, I really do think that there needs to be some sort of culture around, you know, kind of, I don't think we should do, like DevSecOps or, you know, deploying EDR agents on systems. That's kind of silly. That's what a traditional security company might suggest when they hear about all this. But there are certain lessons learned from traditional software development, that should kind of be rolled into the development process. So I know we almost ran out of time. Any questions? Oh, there's tons of them.
Hi. So did you guys look at Tendermint-based chains and the validator platform security, as in like the peer-to-peer layer and you know, OS, any exploits on the validator software itself? Like, did you get to check that?
Yes.
How was it?
How is it?
You can read the reports; they're all public. That's one of the great things about working in the blockchain space. What is that?
Your microphone.
Oh yeah. That's one of the great things about working in the blockchain space is normally these aren't companies a lot of times. They're organizations, and some of them are quite small. They pride themselves on being radically transparent. All their code is out there. They'll often publish the full vulnerability report, so you can go read the findings and find exactly what they found, or what they see is what you see, you know, so from that perspective.
I'll give you a preview of a report that we have that's coming out quite soon. I won't name the customer, but we had a team of about 3 or 4 people that worked on a year to understand the layer 1 security issues across multiple blockchains, which culminated in a nearly 200 pages of documentation as well as custom tools that we'll be releasing in about a month to study some of these properties. Because I actually think that people in the blockchain community take for granted that the layers below them work appropriately, and that the theory that they have around like how 51% attacks work, or Sybil resistance, or other kinds of, you know, what the security ramifications of the transition to proof of stake look like. There seems to be kind of an orthodoxy around these concepts, and that they will work exactly as the theory says they will. Reality is different. Although for Cosmos specifically, I'm a big fan. We work on them quite a bit, and we have several published reports about specifically work with Tendermint and Cosmos, as well as projects in the space. It's bizarro land versus the rest of blockchain, but I also do think that it opens up the doors for use cases that aren't possible with like a public chain like Ethereum. So it's fun for us to play in.
So just a quick question, because, it sounds like a simple one, but I've never been able to get an answer, and maybe I don't get the hype I should, but, so I have crypto, I have a bit of Bitcoin. Last time I did a transaction, an actual Bitcoin transaction, right, not on Coinbase, took 2 hours. And forests are getting destroyed for it. And from this talk, I didn't get to understand, like, as you said, right, most people should actually use Central as platform because it is too complex and too tricky for most people to keep their keys and everything. And so if we go back, like, if we should use centralized platform, my whole question is, and as you said, it's extremely complicated to secure blockchain implementations and blockchains in general. And like, it requires a lot of work, a lot of research, a lot of most financial things, right? A lot of attackers, a lot of stakes, so you need a lot to secure it way more. But in my mind, blockchain was used to make things more secure. But it seems like it's barely helping. So the question is...
That is definitely not the point.
Yeah, okay, so I feel like I'm completely missing the point, because to me, it's like, okay, we need to go back to centralized things, and it's not more secure. So what does it help with? And it seems to not be efficient. I don't understand what it solves in the end.
I think we understand, yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
So, no, it's okay. It's obviously an existential question for the field. And I don't think any of us here are able to like sell you on, hey, blockchain's the right thing to do. But what I do think, like from my perspective, one of the key benefits is that it allows you to cut out the middlemen. That is the shortest way to put it. You can cut out the middlemen. And there are lots and lots of different fields that depend on middlemen that take out their cut of various transactions, that have a lot of trust, like the Depository Trust and Trading Corporation, DTCC, which is like an institution that everybody on Wall Street has to use to clear trades, doesn't really exist in a blockchain world as a consequence of the way it works. But again, like, I am not here to sell you on blockchain. I think that people have adopted it. People use it for transactions. People carry a lot of value in their wallets. They want to use it. There are people that want to let you pay with it because they know that consumers have the money to spend. So technology is being built with it for better or for worse. And what we have to do as the security community is make sure that people don't get hurt, because it is not going away, right? Like, at this point, it might be super inflated in the hype cycle where it has these unreachable expectations for what it will achieve. And it'll eventually go through that trough of disillusionment finally to some level of balance where we have actually evidence-based opinions about what it can do. But like, even in the future, like, we're not going to snap our fingers and this field won't disappear. Like, it's here for the long term now.
I think there can be a comparison to Tor browser. So like, holding your own Bitcoin is versus putting it on a central exchange is similar to using Tor browser versus Chrome, right? Like, Chrome makes sense for a vast majority of people. There are a small number of people for whom Tor makes a lot of sense. And similarly with self-custody, right? If, let's say, your country is sanctioned and you want to get paid for a bug bounty, perhaps if they could pay you in crypto, you could circumvent those sanctions. Whether that is like more or not is like not a question that I'm going to answer, but it is like a way you can get around that.
I think we're out of time.
Can we get a mic on the left now?
Yeah.
Last question, I will try to make it spectacular. I'll try to bounce back on two things that Dan said, that we expect developers to understand every layer, and we expect every layer to be working correctly, right? So if we try to break it down, we have Web3, which is some sort of API with no real standard, no IETF behind it. It's just a bunch of ideas. People do whatever they want. On top of HTTP2, which is on top of HTTP, where you have stateless messages where you have to repeat all of the authentication information. You have security headers that usually developers get wrong. You don't know if the client is going to support it anyway or do it the right way. On top of TCP. So actually, basically HTTP is UDP on top of TCP. Then you have this inside the session where you authenticate again because it's, the inside SSL, sorry, where you authenticate again. You also have public, private keys, so repetition of your crypto wallet. And TCP is then byte-oriented, whereas we have other protocols which already exist, like HTTP, which are already message-oriented connection with a backup connection. And I feel like there's a pattern in the industry where people just keep things on top of things and on top of things where stuff keeps breaking, and instead of spending billions in building a beautiful castle on top of what is already a house of cards, we just spend time repeating patterns on top of stuff that already exists and that we should just leverage. So in the end, we have more and more code, millions of lines, where less would be more, and you could just have maybe your crypto key inside the SSL connection, use that to authenticate directly, and that's it. You don't need the stupid Web3 set of protocols. You have directly SSL supporting messages, inside a CTP maybe or something like that, and you go simpler, faster. You don't have to optimize every millisecond, minify every stupid JavaScript file because you don't even need that anymore, So it pains me a lot to be in this situation.
So you're asking why? Why?
Yeah.
Yes. So I think there's a conversation here where it's not either or, it could be both. And I think that there's really, unfortunately, it's so weird. The blockchain community is exceedingly well funded because it's financialized a lot of types of transactions and activities, which means that it now has robust funding that other fields do not. But there still is incredible work going on in censorship-resistant communication, in anonymous communication, in incrementally distributing existing protocols. And I don't think we have to forget about those because we're working on blockchain security. So I think it's yes, you could argue that, I think these things are more important. Well, yes, you're right. Those things are important. We should work on them.
Heartbleed.
Yeah. And that's why, as Trail of Bits, I am not a blockchain company. I have 20 people working on it, but that is not, I have 100 people that work for me, and many others do work in those parts of the industry. The other thing that's very interesting about blockchain security is it has dragged adjacent fields forward far quicker than anyone would have expected they would mature. In particular, zero-knowledge proofs. You brought up Starknet before and Cairo. The only reason we have access to this advanced cryptography now is because a bunch of blockchain nerds paid for it. And it's great. I'm using that for a million other things. But because of Ethereum and because of blockchain being in this laboratory for software testing research, like I defined in the keynote, we're able to experiment and iterate on these research techniques and prove them out and then use them elsewhere in a way that's just been unseen throughout the history of technology. So that's also another part that's exciting to me. So there aren't just it's not just, hey, these blockchain people are stupid and we should just build stuff on HTTPS and DNS and whatever. But there are some follow-on effects that are positively affecting other fields.
I mean, I'm not saying that only the blockchain industry is doing that. I just wish that we would question what we already have and maybe improve that instead of putting stuff on top every time.
I'm right there with you, man. Sorry.
So I think we're out of time. So if you'd like to chat, we'll be hanging around outside. I would hate to push the next speaker into another slot. So thank you very much.